money.
20, 40,
Like this entire video can be prefaced by just saying money.
$40 million.
Okay, hope you enjoyed. Have a good day, night. Seriously though, beyond the obvious factor of money, why are vices so intertwined with the history of racing? It's a question I've been asking myself since the most important part of racing video I made way back in October, like even before the big tracks video. I mean, it's not like it's exactly a hard pattern to spot. I mean, some of the most iconic parts of racing spawned from the relationships it had with vices. Hell, it still has a relationship with vices. So this video is here to provide a little rundown as to the history, relationship, and reasoning as to why vices and racing are so buddy-buddy. Before even getting into that, what qualifies as a vice? Because if you ask a Buddhist monk, smiling counts as a vice, so I have to set some parameters in order to not have comments telling me that I missed a vice, and when I ask which vice, they're like, I don't know, they say fucking temptation. In the context of this video, vices are certain activities and goods that people willingly indulge in while knowing they are harmful, unappealing, or taboo in some way. The most common of these vices is what we'll be talking about first, actually. Contrary to popular belief, cars and alcohol go together quite well. I haven't done this before, haven't I? Regardless, the statement remains true. One of the oldest disciplines of auto racing was wholly born out of alcohol, and more specifically, the smuggling, illegal sale, and illegal consumption of it. NASCAR's roots lie in the era of Prohibition in America, when dumbasses thought that banning liquor would make people not drink it. As proven with the fact that the justice system exists solely because people do bad stuff, it didn't work, and it turned America into a nation of criminals because, well, everybody drank. Most people weren't really criminals by choice, or at least not major criminals, but real-ass criminals took advantage of Prohibition by turning themselves into suppliers for everyone else. Bootleggers were a critical part of these crime families' operations, usually working in tandem with the Italian, Irish, Jewish, and black mobs to distill, smuggle, and then distribute their alcohol across major cities like New York, Chicago, and New Orleans. Detroit and the Pacific Northwest, like Seattle and Portland, they also had quite large smuggler populations, but that's because they were on the border with Canada, and Canada didn't really have Prohibition. Everybody was still drinking there as well, so it didn't really matter. This is actually the most common way that people got their liquor in America rather than bootlegging and moonshining, but that doesn't apply to what we're talking about here. The bootleggers took refuge in the Appalachians, as the mountains provided security from the law as the terrain was so harsh, especially for the newfangled cars that were rolling around more often now. However, the problem here is that the terrain was also harsh for the bootleggers' cars, who often carried out deliveries and shipments of liquor themselves. So this was when they began modifying their cars. Model A's, Model T's, Hudson Super 6s, Caddy Type 61s, those types. They put more horsepower in them and chunkier tires to better handle the Appalachians, and later in Prohibition, Ford V8s were the main choice and they were modified the exact same. These cars weren't slow by any means, so to kill time whenever there was too much heat or when there was no delivery work needing to be done, the rum runners would carve out sections of the land, usually in an oval or vague circle shape, and they would just race their modified stock cars around it. After Prohibition, stock car racing was a pretty popular pastime in Lower Appalachia, so this guy named Bill France stepped in, saw how commercially successful it could be. In 1948, he created NASCAR, so here we are today. The foundations for the biggest racing series in the US were based on drunk, moonshining hillbillies driving in circles. Like, let's be frank. As NASCAR grew in popularity and as sponsorship was officially allowed in 1972, but they were getting sponsors way before that, alcohol sponsorships became a cornerstone of the sport. Some of the most iconic cars to ever grace the series had alcohol liveries. There was even a conflict between beer companies over who could get the best sponsorship in NASCAR during the 80s. The beer wars were fought between Anheuser-Busch, Miller, and Coors. Over NASCAR's time, the Miller High Life Regal, the Budweiser Monte Carlo, and the Jack Daniels Monte Carlo have been some of the most recognizable and iconic liveries to ever come from the series, being recognized globally, like just beyond America. Without NASCAR and American hyper-capitalism combining, we would have never had liveries as we know them today. The FIA actually legalized liveries and sponsorship, like non-parent country, non-parent company sponsorship, before NASCAR in 1968, but they were inspired by American racing as they allowed sponsorship in America. Even if NASCAR said they didn't, they did. They were lying. Almost immediately after this, some of the most iconic alcohol sponsorships ever immediately began, including brands like Jägermeister and Warsteiner, but most notably, Martini. I've already fully covered Martini pretty much in the, once again, previously mentioned most important part of racing video. If you want a more in-depth explanation, go watch that. But to keep it short and sweet, sponsored Alfa Romeo 1962, first major alcohol sponsorship at 24 Hours Daytona, then 70s big partnership with Porsche, then 80s big partnership with Martini through the 90s, then Williams, and you know, all that bullshit. Most successful alcohol sponsorship, probably most successful sponsorship ever, actually. And there you go, history of Martini. The rapid growth of Martini was seen alongside F1's ties with alcohol growing massively through that exact same period. The first season of F1 in 1950 saw the French Grand Prix be driven near the town of Reims in France, a very notable champagne hub that contained the Ruinart house. I have to switch to my French accent when I'm speaking. Ruinart, something like that. Fuck off. The winner of the Grand Prix was given a bottle of champagne, likely Renard. Fuck off, I don't care. And from then on, it became a tradition. Another notable alcohol tradition would be the spraying of alcohol on the podium, which was started by Dan Gurney and a bottle of Moet Chandon after winning the 1967. I fucked up in the original recording, 24 Hours of Le Mans. Going back to F1 though, as another vice very tied to racing, died out throughout the 90s and 2000s, alcohol stepped in to take its place alongside tech companies in order to fill the monetary void left by it. Which leads us to the modern day, where alcohol is what upholds the glamorous aspect of F1. So why did alcohol sponsor racing so heavily? Well, again, beyond the money, there are really two main points. Regional ties, the identity of racing. From rum running and the power of the big three, in the US at least, to Moet Chandon and Champagne in general within France where the FIA is located, to Martini, Jägermeister, Warsteiner, Heineken, and the rest of Europe, alcohol was significant to the culture that surrounded whichever race or discipline that was being hosted there. Whether it be beer, or vermouth, or champagne, or whatever the fuck Jägermeister is, it was always a key aspect of the region it was within, meaning that the companies had nothing to lose from partnership with racing teams, and racing teams only gain more money to better fund their R&D. This phenomenon isn't only seen in Western Europe and America. Of course, Australia, probably the drunkest place in the world, they have VB, they have Foster's, which apparently sucks. They have Tui's, I think that's how you say it. And they also have American whiskeys like Jim Beam and Jack Daniels. The only racing market that didn't actually have a lot of alcohol was Japan, which in retrospect makes total sense. The second reason as to why alcohol and racing are so intertwined, however, is much more interesting, and really sets the foundation for two of the other main vices seen within motorsport. In the modern age of racing, where safety is paramount above all else, for the better, a major factor of the growth of motorsport really began to fade away: danger. The identity of racing has changed monumentally compared to the days when sponsorship grew rapidly and became a pillar of racing. NASCAR was based off of breaking the law, for fuck's sakes. Its identity used to lie in rebellion. Throughout the rapid growth of racing and sponsorship in the 60s, racing was incredibly dangerous. Cars were getting faster than safety could keep up. From that decade through to Senna's death in 1994, racing always had this air of elusiveness, danger, and critically nobility to it. These drivers are seen as brave souls who are willing to risk their lives to eke out just a little more speed out of every corner. Push the limit of what the human body can do for a little bit longer, These guys were the poster children of F1's growth and popularity, as their driving styles were putting them on the edge of death, literally. Little too close for some. Rest in peace, Gilles Villeneuve. I would say rest in peace, Senna, but you dated a 15-year-old. So you might be asking, how does alcohol tie into any of this? Well, to be extremely simple and to give you the overall theme of basically this video, this image of danger and death, yet elegance and sophistication, as well as masculinity, which will definitely be expanded upon later, can be summarized in one word: aura. Alcohol and F1 have such a successful sponsorship history because of aura. I mean, these drivers were damn near seen as soldiers back then, which is a pretty critical point, actually. They were brave and noble, and they were willing to put their life on the line for the sake of speed or something like that. That gave them aura. Alcohol as a business has been rooted between the grittiness of alcohol production in a lot of cases and the elegance and high class of which it's most often associated with, other than beer, which, expected. Voice crack of hell. Holy fuck. This gives alcohol an aura of power and shit like that, which mixes very nicely with a very rich man's sport such as racing. The next major vice to sponsor racing is probably the first one you thought of if you clicked this video, and once again, while the main answer to the question of why it was so linked with racing is money, the story behind this ties into a much more varied debate. I'm talking about tobacco. We can keep this short. Tobacco sponsorship began January 1st, 1968, day the FIA legalized it, with John Love's Gunston Brabham, which, Rhodesian man with Rhodesian cigarettes. Oh boy. From then on, the earliest major brands that got in on racing were Gold Leaf, John Player Special, and of course Marlboro. Some of the greatest liveries in racing were tobacco liveries, specifically cigarette liveries, which is an important distinction for later. Marlboro McLarens and Ferrari, Silk Cut XGR9, the Rothmans Porsches, West McLarens, Camel Williams, Winfield R32s. You get the gist. As the world realized that smoking was bottom two things you could do to your body besides drinking mercury, it began being phased out by law throughout the 90s and 2000s. In the modern day, nicotine is actually still a pretty big sponsor in F1, as players like Philip Morris, which is Marlboro, Benson and Hedges, Rothmans, all that bullshit, and British American Tobacco, which is Lucky Strike, Winfield, Camel, had sponsors like Mission Winnow and A Better Tomorrow on Ferraris and McLarens in the late 2010s, early 2020s. You might remember the controversy around that. And now they have nicotine pouches and vapes like Zen, Views, Velo, on the same McLarens and Ferraris. This is pretty much the last bastion of big tobacco alongside NASCAR, which still has, Zen sponsors, stuff like that. But it's much, much less prevalent now, which is great. So as promised earlier, the reason why tobacco was so successful in racing for so long was because of a factor that at first glance doesn't really tie into racing. But when you dig, you realize it's played a much bigger role in a lot of aspects of motorsport than you think. The perception of masculinity. I know I sound like a fucking hippie. I know I sound crazy, but please hear me out, all right? We're going to divulge a little bit. You ready? World War I was the first time the image of smoking changed pretty drastically. Prior to it, tobacco and smoking was seen as harmful and unsanitary, unless you were smoking from a pipe. Automated cigarette rollers were introduced in the 17th century. We found out how to roll tobacco with a machine before we figured out electricity, which I find really funny. The automated cigarette roller made cigarettes a lot cheaper, which turned cigarettes into a symbol of the poor working class in the Western world. Pipes were for rich white niggas, cigarettes were for women, kids, minorities, poor people, anybody who wasn't rich and white, probably tall. When the war broke out, cigarettes became the method rather than pipes, as they were light, they were dirt cheap, they packed the same amount of nicotine in them as a pipe, which calmed soldiers on the front lines and made them more willing to, die under their bitch-ass commanders and world leaders. But as you may know, anything tied to the military means it's manly. So cigarettes very, very quickly became a symbol of strong masculinity, which only increased during and after World War II as the Nazis were against smoking, which, it allowed big tobacco to basically manipulate the populace into thinking smoking was a sign of agreement with the Nazis and fascism in general. In the span of about 30 years, cigarettes changed from a sign of poverty and being effeminate and childlike to being manly and rich and brave and white. As racing As racing grew in the mid-century, parallels were seen between the drivers and the soldiers by the populace and as well by big tobacco that were brought up earlier. So mentioning the previously brought up aspect of glamour and aura that racing already had and combining it with the aura that cigarettes had, not dip, not loose leaf, specifically cigarettes. We like to overgeneralize and say tobacco, but that also covers, chewing tobacco, and that covers loose leaf tobacco, which is what you put in pipes. Those fell way out of order. Unless you lived in the South, nobody knows what fucking Copenhagen is, or Grizzly. Anyways, the two industries grew massively together as the Venn diagram of racing fans and tobacco fans, enjoyers, partakers, it's basically a circle. It was basically a circle back then. So to summarize, racing has aura and makes people manly. Cigarettes have aura and makes people manly. Also, big tobacco was filthy fucking rich, and they had very little qualms about lying about the health risks of smoking, so it's not as if fucking Max Mosley was gonna stop them, you know what I'm saying? I want to get this section over with because it's not really that interesting, but let's go. Gamification has risen a shit ton over the past few years as sports betting apps like DraftKings, FanDuel, and BetMGM have been marketing so aggressively lately. The reason why they've been so successful as of late is that a lot of investors have really dropped off or actually fully pulled out of a lot of sports. Tobacco, tech, alcohol, sports apparel, they've all taken a backseat lately as sports betting has become so much more accessible and widespread. Underground betting websites where regulations are just fucking fugazi, they don't exist, are also a massive problem. Most of them are from Russia, so they'll never truly be dealt with. This doesn't really tie into racing individually, it's more of a world problem right now. A lack of regulation and people like being deplorable, what are you going to do about it? It's not really fun or intriguing as much as the other vices, because the other vices have a lot of history behind them. Gambling has always been like people like to lose money. Like, that's really it. So I'll let other YouTubers talk about this shit ad nauseum instead of me, because I don't care. I don't care. It's so fucking boring. The last vice I want to talk about is less of a vice in the traditional sense, but still an issue that I feel disproportionately affects racing as a sport. There should be a lot more women in racing, yet for decades the role of women in motorsports was secondary. Either a grid girl or a podium girl, either way, you're staring at boobs, alright? I wanted to know why, and wouldn't you know it, this idea of masculinity starts to come in again. The history of womanizing in motorsports really goes back to the roles of men and women in general during the time, which I don't have the time to talk about. This video would be 4 fucking days long, but in general, women were secondary to men in terms of anything physical beyond house chores. This translated to sports, of course, so for the first 50 odd years of motor racing, women weren't really involved in any way at all beyond secondary roles meant to flaunt the drivers, who were men. There's really 3 reasons why women have been able to get into racing as easily as men until very recently. The overrepresentation of men, of course, made racing a man's space, which inherently made it difficult for women to join, as of course they aren't dudes. Racing was genuinely dangerous back then, and that risk drew a lot of people in, mainly men. Those men, and probably a few women, thought that women weren't capable of handling that risk, that they'd crumble under the pressure and cause a massive accident or some bullshit. Additionally, people even thought steering was too heavy in race cars for women to handle back then, which just wasn't true. I'll talk about Mary McGee. Oh, I spoiled her name, but Mary McGee. You know what I'm saying. All of that caused a lack of opportunity for women to race in the first place. I shouldn't have to explain what that means. It's said right there. Finally, the last point. The viewer base of racing was a major factor for a long time. As was mentioned earlier, racing was seen as a man's sport. It flaunted masculinity to the utmost degree. Niggas were out here like ripping darts, drinking liquor, and with the case of many drivers such as James Hunt and Alan Jones, fucking like rabbits. Due to the almost overbearing macho bullshit a lot of people showcased back then, women were relegated as sideshows to the racing. Entertainment for the dudes who were angry that nobody fucking crashed and died yet. Sex sells, I guess. That's how it goes. The reputation of drivers like Hunt and Jones made them seem like rock stars. They got to drive fast, they got severely intoxicated off of many substances, and they crack supermodels. So what does this all come back to? In the eyes of a large percentage of the fan base of racing, up until really the 2010s, I'd say it really died out once Jenson Button stopped seeming like a playboy. I think that's when it really died out. So up until the 2010s, all of that shit was aura. Like, the aura of drivers inherently included treating women differently. In some cases, Hunt and Jones like objects. It took decades for women to even get a real chance in racing, and then even more decades for them to get a fair chance at racing. Mary McGee was really the first to break into it, as she was winning SCCA races in the 50s and competing in FIM in the 60s. Where she was eventually blackballed as new rules targeted specifically to women were coming in, even though she was the only woman racing in their series. By the time she was done, like, she had pulled out, they never came into effect anyways, so that kind of sucks. But yeah, McGee was unfortunately an outlier for about 20 years or so, until Layla Lombardi scored points in F1 in 1975 and then got 2nd and 4th in class at Le Mans the 2 following years. She got 2nd in a Stratos, by the way, which is fucking sick. Then Michelle Mouton was nipping at the heels of Walter Royal and Ari Vatanen and Henry Toivonen and all those guys during the 80s for years. Between then and now, women have become a much bigger presence in motorsport both on and off the track, as the number of racing fans who are women increased massively. Now, to be fair, that did come from F1, Drive to Survive. You can say what you want about those fans, I know damn well I have. Not the most pleasurable type. They took over Call of Duty too. Beyond that, beyond some annoying fans, more women are getting opportunities to drive in general, or be at least connected to the driving. Susie Wolf, Dorian Pin, Jamie Chadwick, the Iron Dames GT3 racing team, the F1 Academy, and I guess Bianca Bustamante. She's not very good, but I guess she brings more eyes to women's racing. I mean, she brings more eyes in general. Have you seen her? God damn. Sorry. All of those people have done great work in making racing more accessible for girls and women, which is just an inherent positive. There's also that one lady, I forgot her name. I think her name's Kayla. She just won a sports bike race. I think she won like a Daytona 200 sports bike race. She's 18 when she did that. That's fucking insane. That's bonkers. And with that, we've now covered how and why vices have been a mainstay in racing for so many years. Alright, I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I wanted to keep this video short, as it was more of an outright passion video. If you couldn't tell by my tone, this was more of a video that was just like, oh yeah, I want to talk about this. So this entire script was written in about 6 hours. All the research, 4 hours. There's a lot of women, by the way, in the final section that I probably missed. So put their names in the comments, I guess, and put your favorite, I don't know, cigarette liveries and alcohol liveries and, I don't know, womanizers, I guess. I don't know. This was more of a passion video than a, you know, thoughts and ideas video, if you know what I mean. I wanted this video to be more chill, but I knew the second I was reading like dissertations on why vices are such good sponsors in sports and shit, and like the culture around tobacco and alcohol and gender roles, I knew I was fucking cooked. I knew I was cooked. This video, the recording software says this video is 27 minutes long as of right now, so I hope y'all enjoyed this. The new channel is now up, by the way. Link is in the description. I'm guessing you're one of the few people who will actually like that, because if you're listening to me right now, that means you're listening to my outro rants, which means you probably like me talking. I don't fucking know. Just go check out that channel if you're hearing this right now. You'll like what's gonna go on there over the summer. And yeah, again, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a good day, night, morning, afternoon, whatever. Just have a good one, man. Have a good one.
Get shit, love bitch, get pissed. I'm traveling around ballin' door like Ish Smith. I love cream soda, I think I'm on my fifth. Thinking that I owe your love, bitch, eat dick, I know why your bitch like this, I know why your bitch like this, like this.